Hello, everyone, and welcome to the real estate market analysis for Gilroy, California for October of 2023. This is where we take a little time out to review the numbers, see where we're at, take a look at where we've been, and see if we can't figure out where the markets might be heading in Gilroy. So without any more delay, let's go ahead and jump in and talk about the total number of active listings. This is the total inventory that was on the market in Gilroy. So for you buyers out there, that would be the total number of homes you had to choose from. For you sellers out there, that's the competition that you had from other sellers. Now, as you can see, we had a 36% decline from the same time last year. That is a huge drop. Now, also remember the context of where we are. Back in October of 2022, we were hitting some very high interest rates. So obviously inventory is going to accumulate because there are fewer buyers out there who are able to afford homes at their preferred monthly payment, right? So once you're faced with 7-8% interest rates, obviously there's going to be fewer buyers out there in the marketplace, which I think explains that. Now, over time, as people see interest rates drop, or they see that sort of a comfort level builds with certain interest rates, you'll see that sort of gets mitigated. And all through 2023, we saw those numbers substantially drop to the point where in October of 2023, we were at 68 days. We had 68 homes on the market. We'll talk about how many days we had towards the end, but we had 68 homes on the market in October of 2023, with numbers boosting sort of January, February, March, April as we headed into the peak of the season, which is very normal. It's actually surprising not to see more homes come on the market actually in that first quarter of 2023. But we did see those numbers go up, and we saw sort of the levels be relatively flat until we peaked this month in October. We've got the highest number of homes on the market in Gilroy for the year of 2023 right now so far. And as I said before, that's a 36% drop from the same time last year. If we look at months of inventory, and to get a feel for what months of inventory is, if you were to freeze the inventory numbers as they are today, so freeze it at 68 and freeze it at the total number of homes sold in the month of October, which we'll be talking about in a minute, that tells you how many months of inventory you have. And we have 1.9 months of inventory. And to sort of put that into context for you, nationally, a balanced market is typically thought of to be 4.5 to 5.5 months of inventory. The lower this number is, the more of a seller's market we're in, and the higher this number is, the more of a buyer's market we're in. So we are well into seller market territory, at least as it relates to the total number of listings with month of inventory factored in. All right, now let's go ahead and take a look at the total number of new listings. These are the number of homes that went on the market in the month, and we can see it's very much just a wash from last year. Basically the same number of homes went on the market in October of 2023 as they did in October of 22. This year we had 50 homes go on the market. Last year we had 51 homes go on the market. If we take a look at the trends here, we can see that between September and October, it was really flat from August, September, October, which is almost true. The same kind of trends we're seeing this year, with the one difference being there were more homes on the market in August of 2023 than in September and October, whereas last year that number was actually a little bit lower, but still relatively flat, with us seeing our peak of new listings in June. We normally see the buildup in April, May, and June to listings, and this is all very typical. What we're seeing here in 2023 is totally normal, what we would expect to see. If we use last year as a model, we would expect to see new listings drop in November and December as sellers sort of decide, either to delay their decision or just not list, simply because they don't want to do it in a time of the year when they're going to be dealing with Thanksgiving and Christmas and potentially having guests coming over to the home. And frankly, they don't want to deal with potentially having folks covered in rain and mud coming through their house. So it's just one of those things where it's a seasonal thing. And that's super normal for that to happen in those winter months. Now let's go ahead and take a look at total number of homes sold. Now, as we look at the total number of homes sold in Gilroy for October of 2023, we can see that the number is up from last year. Last year, we had 28 homes sold in October. This year, we had 23 homes. That's a 29% increase. Now, to sort of put this into context, if we think about total number of homes sold versus total number of homes listed, we can then figure out, did we sell more homes than we listed? In other words, did we add more homes to the total active inventory, or did we actually end up reducing the overall homes in the market? And remember, we had 50 homes that were listed. We had 36 homes that were sold. So overall, we sold fewer homes than we listed, which means we added 14 homes to the inventory. What's interesting is that tended to be the trend throughout the county and in San Jose. But interestingly enough, in Morgan Hill, that was not the case. We actually took 8 homes off of the market in Morgan Hill. So we sold more homes than were listed, which is kind of an interesting thing to note. In terms of homes sold, you can see we have the usual peaks you would expect in May and June. Last year, we had an interesting peak in September as well. If we take a look at what happened from October and the following months, we can see things were relatively flat in November and then took a dip in December and January. We would expect to see the same things. Just seasonally, we would expect to see the same things, but my guess is overall, the numbers will be higher. So in other words, we were right at 19 in December and January of last year, of 2022. My guess would be that number will still be about equal in December and November, but it'll be higher than that number from last year just because we're seeing an increased level of activity here in Gilroy. Next, average original list price. And when I say original list price, I phrase it that way specifically to point out that this is the number that sellers expected the day they listed the house. So this is when the listing was first entered into the multiple listing service, this is the number that was used. So this is before any price reductions or any price increases that may have been used to change the price of the home as it was going through the listing process or going through the marketing process. So this is what sellers expected to get right out of their minds. This is where their heads were at. And interestingly enough, in Gilroy, unlike other areas, this number went down. So the original list, and there are other areas where this happens, but Gilroy is one of the few places that seems very calibrated to what's going on with prices, because as we can see from other areas, overall in the county, sellers were expecting more than they were last year. And overall in Santa Clara County, it wasn't much. It was only 0.8% more than 2022, but it was higher. In San Jose, that number was 2.5% higher than last year. And in Morgan Hill, it was a whopping 30.6% higher than last year. So expectations were much higher, but also because we have smaller sample sizes, the true number to take away from that Morgan Hill number is simply more higher priced homes in more affluent communities were being listed during that month. So that's just something to sort of understand as we're looking through numbers, that it wasn't a blanket 30.6% increase. But overall, it is true that sellers in Morgan Hill are having higher expectations at all price points in terms of how much they get for their homes. Now, in Gilroy, the opposite is true. We saw a 14.3% drop in the average original list price. It was $1.3 million last year. It's $1.14 million this year. So it's just about what people want. This is what they want to list for, not what they sold for. So let's go ahead and compare that now to what the average sales price was. Interestingly enough, the average sale price only went down 2.3%. Last year it was $1,125,000. This year it's $1.1 million, basically. And if we take a look at that and compare it to the expectations, right, that means that on average, expectations were $42,000 above what the market will bring to bear in terms of purchasing power. So not a horrible discrepancy. We have some other communities where this number is much more separated. Morgan Hill is a good example where in the month of October, we saw a $162,000 difference between expectations and what homes were actually selling for, which is another clue that some of this has to do with just what price points homes are being listed at based on just whether or not we had a general uptick in more high-priced properties being put onto the market. And what's interesting is we'll see in a minute in terms of the actual sales, the inventory numbers obviously tell us these are absolutely going, but we're going to see in a minute what the percent of list price is. And that's another one that I think is giving us some interesting insights into this particular problem. Okay, let's go ahead and in terms of what I estimate things are going to happen, you can see things have been relatively flat. If you sort of normalize these graphs, there's not really a trend to spot other than it's been relatively flat. My expectation is that there's been a mild trend downward, and it wouldn't surprise me if we continue to see that. But as interest rates come down, I think that this is a good thing for Gilroy, and that I think it does potentially inspire more buyers to come out, and which would tend to keep these prices at least the level that they're tending to be right now. If we look at percent of list price, which is what I was just teasing about a moment ago, we can see that in Gilroy, folks are getting 2.3% over asking price in October. That's up from 98.7% last year. That's a 3.6% overall increase. So things are pretty robust in Gilroy in October. And what this number basically means is if it says 100%, that means that the home sold for the list price. If it's 102.3, that means it was 2.3% above list price. And at 99%, which is what happened in September, that would be 1% below asking price. So overall, sellers are getting their price. They're not just getting their price, but getting a good chunk over their asking price. This is all good, particularly when you take into account the fact that sellers have not been completely nuts in terms of where they list their homes for sale. Sellers have been far more calibrated to the realities of the market. Now, if we take a look at this for a place like Morgan Hill, where expectations have been severely bloated, it is one of the only communities where this number is below 100 at 98.5, for instance, for the month of October for Morgan Hill. So that's a good thing for Gilroy. It keeps properties moving, but it keeps them moving at a pace where sellers are definitely getting more than they're asking for on average for the homes that they're trying to sell. Next, let's go ahead and talk about days on market. This is how long it takes to get a home sold. We can see that it's currently down to 17 days in October of 2023. It was 35 days last year. That's a 51% drop. And we can see it's been on the decline really since we had February of 2023, where it was 62 days. And one reason why we had such a big February is because in that first quarter of the year, we saw a surge in buyers. So what ended up happening was homes that had been stuck on the market for a longer time, that had accumulated over the course of the end of 2022, ended up selling in 2023 simply because the inventory was selling off. And there was also at the same time that was happening, we were seeing homes reducing their prices. So it really inspired an awful lot of purchases to happen in February. Okay, where do we go from here? I think we tend to see more of the same of the same trends that we saw last year, where days on market likely goes up with a drop in January. That's actually fairly typical. And usually either January, February, or March tends to see some sort of a jump as pent-up stock gets sold. Not likely to happen now since we have such inventory challenges. We haven't accumulated a lot of inventory like we did in 2022 towards the end of the year with interest rates being so crazy. So my guess is we won't see that huge hump, but we might see a little bit of a bump as older stock gets sold off in those first couple of months of the year. Next, let's talk about price reductions in Gilroy. We've seen an interesting trend here, and I think that it shows a lot more stability in Gilroy than in some other areas. So we had 29% of homes have a price reduction in the month of September of 2023. In October of 2023, we had 26% of homes drop. So it's gone down a little bit, not a ton, but it's a 56% drop from the same time last year. So a quarter of homes had to experience did experience a price reduction in October, indicating that sellers were adjusting to the marketplace, which I think is healthy. I don't think it's an indication of a problem. We've had some areas where this number is lower or higher, right? The county overall is at 25%. In terms of price reductions. So right there in line with what the county was seeing in general. San Jose actually saw more at 27%. Morgan Hill saw fewer at 20%, which is also interesting because we also saw some really out there expectations in terms of sales price expectations and then what homes are actually selling for, which I think just indicates more price reductions for Morgan Hill moving forward, unless the demand just stays crazy, which I don't think it will. All right, folks. I hope that's been valuable for you. My name is Robert Whitelaw. I'm a licensed real estate broker right here in Silicon Valley, ready to help you with any of your buying, selling, or investing needs. I've got some great tools at my website, soldbyrobert.com. Whether you want to get an instant online valuation of your home or you want to start your home search, you can head on over to soldbyrobert.com and get that going there. Now, the goal is to always leave you with more knowledge on the table than I take up in your time, and I absolutely hope that we've achieved that today. Thanks again for listening. I will talk to you all next time.